Okay, Ron.
Still standing, yeah.
All right, can we call it to order at 7:59?
Sure.
Ooh, wasn't started early. All right, welcome everybody to the February meeting. I don't think there's anything we need to do before jumping right into the secretary's report and the approval of minutes of both our annual meeting and the regular
Great, can we call it
meeting.
to order at 7:59? Sure. Wasn't started. Welcome everybody to,
One of them needs to go on like mute.
Can you guys able to mute?
there's anything we need to do before jumping right into.
Can I mute this?
Well, then they won't
Never good
hear
now.
us.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh. Panther.
See, that's
Once
what,
again.
that's what happens when you start at 7:59. Everything just goes
Out of
crazy.
whack, right.
All right, so, if we head towards the approval of the minutes, I'll take that motion, barring any changes that anyone needs to make, for anyone that was present, so there'll be anyone that didn't.
I'll make a motion.
I'll
second that.
Todd, thank you. All those in favor of accepting the minutes? Aye. Thank you. Moving on, we'll go right to Bob and the treasurer's report.
Okay, income statement first, income just interest for the month at $275. We have, what you'll see again, as it was in January, some bills were paid that were actually for 2020, so the total expenses do not match between the 2 months because it's allocated somewhere else. But going through them in detail, we have the management fee, of course. We have meeting expense, that'll be detailed on the next page. We have NYSEG and National Grid, our prepayment of utilities for $250. Dues and memberships and advertising and promotion, those two lines are a compilation of things that you will see again on the next page. Property taxes, single line item, for a total January expense of $16,276.62. If we go to the statement of cash transactions now, that's where all your detail is broken out. We had money coming in and going out for a check charge. They charged us and then reimbursed us, so that's really no big deal. You'll see the interest there. For this month, we've got the town of Lockport, town for travel, attorneys, accountants, Central Design Group for computer work, I assume.
Website, yeah.
Yep. We've got the printer, the $39.45, the town for the taxes again. And then we have dues and memberships list that add to the numbers on the previous page down to the Invest Buffalo Niagara, which is not a separate line item. Oh, yes, it's part of the advertising promotion on the page before. And the NYSEG and National Grid, and then the check charge that goes in and out. So for a total that actually went in and out of $28,152.60 out for the month of January. And then the balance sheet at the end, we've got right about our 100 in checking account, 108.92, and the savings 1605,007. The total assets and liabilities match top and bottom of 2719,644. We have the two bonds now, for the current one and the long term. One is for the property, correct?
They both are.
They're both for the property.
Yeah, this one's what's
Oh,
this
that's right.
year.
Current versus long
We
term.
broke them up, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. We have the accrued GM, fixed assets of $1013,745, and again, our total of $2719,644. And that's it for the statements.
Does anyone have any questions of Bob? Otherwise, I'll take a motion to accept the treasurer's report as presented. Darlene and Todd, thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Okay, for the checks now, we've got the town, it's a combination of the monthly contract, and that should say advertising expenses for the new clerk, not additional expenses for the new clerk. We got some mileage for Tom, some computer equipment for $45.98, new domain and, a new domain and added video to webpage, new domain.
Well, really, it should say is the annual domain
Oh.
registration, which is unfortunate because it's due next month, and yet, you know, the town's involved in a website search, so who knows where that ends up, but nonetheless, you know, we'll keep an eye on that charge, and if there was a subsequent need for a refund, we'll pay attention to that.
Okay, annual dues to the Lockport Business Association, Summit, the sign at the site?
Nope, if you look out in the front entrance, I'd always looked at this really old logo sign, and I thought, well, that's kind of silly, that's not our logo with the tree and so on, so I had Cookie make us one in our front entrance, and we took down like the Walmart and put Yahoo out there and New York River, things that are non-retail, if you will. Now, obviously, until we paint it in April, it still looks kind of shocky and things might move around a bit, but yeah, I can show it to you on the way,
Okay.
the way up.
And then our first payment for the audit of $3,800 with total February checks of $82,0881. And I'd like to move we pay them.
Do we have a second of that?
I'll second that.
Thanks, Todd. All those in favor of paying the bills?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. All right. Tom, we'll go to you for director's report.
You've got my monthly report, probably the most, you know, pressing or important thing is, you know, we have hired a new administrative assistant. Her resume is in your packet. It was interesting in the sense that I think a lot of us realized that one of the quote-unquote industries that have been really hammered as a result of the pandemic was colleges and universities. And not only did she come out of DUville, one of the other finalists was a very recent forced retirement from NTRIP. And again, we had really three really good quality candidates, which is good. But I think Christine fits the mode most. She should start on the 18th of February. There's a town work session on the 17th where she's on the agenda to be approved. Obviously, I'll introduce her to you all as soon as possible. But yeah, I think she'll be a good fit. Lives in Lockport, which is always a nice situation. Real strong references, obviously, or we wouldn't have gone in that direction. So, yep. I did, and it's not super noticeable, but I did shoot out some letters to both Schumer and Joe LeBrand. In that case, in Schumer's case, hey, congrats on being, you know, Senate Majority Leader. But beyond that, there is in the stimulus bill funds to go to the Economic Development Administration at the federal level that allegedly would flow to IDAs in light of probably assuming that, you know, in IDAs like ourselves where there are much fewer deals in the year and knowing that that's your sole source of funding, that there may be funds available. So obviously I just encourage them to be A, aware of it, and B, that, you know, we would benefit or appreciate that. On the Ort and Norris side, I don't know the particulars, and that's how New York operates, I think, but especially for Empire State Development, both the controller and the governor's office have added all these extra layers of review. And I think, in the one hand, they're sort of sitting there saying, well, wait, New York's super challenged. We've got to make sure every penny we spend makes sense. And on the other hand, they're now holding deals to sort of different levels of expectation, if you will. So, you know, again, just encouraging them to be aware that that was underway and that that really doesn't work well for those of us in the economic development circle. So, no biggie, but I did work with the folks from Wendell on getting ready to do a community development block grant. If you're not familiar with those, we'll talk about what they can be typically used for. But they're very strongly tilted towards low and moderate income. And for the longest time, the town never even gave it a thought because none of its census tracts qualified. Well, now there actually are 2 census tracts on face value that qualify, like just barely. But anyway, long story short, in Wendell's discussions with the Office of Home and Community Renewal, the town would have needed to complete an individualized income survey, wherever that project we were giving consideration to, we're gonna go to. Poor Tom had to set up public hearings, then say, just kidding, and so on. So at this point, we're not moving forward. The other reason I have it on there is those were attempted to be towards infrastructure grants. There are economic development grants. We could use a CDBG grant to assist a particular project. Again, that project would have to commit to use its best efforts to hire low and moderate income people and so on. The good news about that is there are no deadlines for that. This had like a March 3rd deadline on it. So I would never rule out that we wouldn't circle back and take a look at CDBG dollars if there was a deal that just still needed some sort of extra help. But more just for your information on the town. That air duct cleaning is done. We've gotten pictures and reports. The good news for this building is it's kind of was built at that time when people didn't necessarily use aluminum ductwork, but the fiberboard duct. So that's all been sealed, and the sealant's antibacterial, so hopefully that'll be a benefit. Bob mentioned that we had dues payments to the winter 2-day virtual Economic Development Council conference. Like a lot of things, I'd give it a B minus. There were a couple solid sessions. Good session on sort of the whole site selection process, maybe not surprisingly how much more it's online now. And so I think that we've made, or once Christina's here, we've made a couple changes to our landing page. I think that potentially has some of the languages that site selectors would be interested in. I do still have plans to try and go do more of a street side video of the park, to have a second video uploaded. Not that the drone stuff doesn't help when some person from California, let's say, is trying to take a look and decide. So there was also a good session on tweaks to pilots, kind of think both renewable energy or adaptive reuse and so on. And then I was not familiar with this term, some of you might have been, of economic gardening, which is kind of a program that's, you know, relatively nationwide now. It tends to be used by economic development organizations. For our sake, Invest Buffalo Niagara is considering doing it. They would need some seed funds to begin to do it, but most importantly, where we would be interested in is economic development organizations are able to recommend companies that are either struggling or maybe at a point of, you know, you think they could have scalability, but they just can't seem to kind of carry the day, and they sort of enter this economic garden and are matched up with consultants and so on, all covered by, you know, other expenses. So we'll keep an eye on whether Invest finds the dollars. I can certainly think of at least 2 entities to refer to them, but it was certainly not a term I was familiar with. Kind of in typical, again, New York State fashion, Empire State Development did come out with this Empire Digital Initiative, and it was targeted to food and beverage industries only. It was basically a combination of PayPal and an entity I wasn't familiar with, and Eric was, called Ritual, which is a comparable sort of online ordering app. And, you know, the program would allow food and beverage entities to either begin utilizing and setting up sort of a out-of-the-box online ordering process. And then obviously with PayPal, you know, folks use PayPal to pay for those. There were some reimbursements to the business for the first, I don't remember, 50 orders on PayPal or something. You know, if you look at our food and beverage industry in the town, it's kind of tale of two stories. It's either supranational franchised entities or the mom and pops. I only sent the letters to the mom and pops. Even in that case, I think as I've sort of bumped into those, I think most of them already have fired up online ordering, have more than enough ways to be paid, be it Square, PayPal, credit cards, and so on. I don't think there'll be a tremendous level of interest here in the town, but nonetheless, they may get phone calls from businesses and from these consultants, and I certainly sent them a a one-page letter just explaining the program, but, I don't know if it's too little too late, or maybe most businesses are farther along than they really think they are, but that's enough. As we sort of annually do, we have had communication with, and received a letter, that obviously also got sent to Eastern Applied Research, letting them know their pilot ends, this year in a few months, actually, so that's been, noticed as well. I won't waste your time anymore on that ritual in PayPal. The audit is really done, the independent external audit. You know, Kate did a lot of the work with them virtually. I had 2 brief Zoom calls, kind of your standard fraud call, any kind of subsequent action kind of calls that were both fairly brief. So at this point, they are scheduled to present at our audit committee meeting on 3/11 at 7:30. It's still a little bit of a question of whether it'll be here in person. Lumsden, at this point, didn't have green-lighted their employees to be out interacting in person. I don't think it'd be the end of the world if they do it via phone, or I could even set up my Chromebook or something to have them quasi in person. But as far as we're concerned, that audit is done and over with, and we'll see what's up. Reminder that we're closed for President's Day. And then the last thing that I just added, because I'm deep into Paris, is if you look near the back of your packet, you'll see, right before you get to the SJB proposal, which we'll talk about later, we annually kind of bless a number of documents. You did it last month in the annual meeting, think policies and procedures and fee schedules and so on. What I've got in today's packet, which I'm not recommending any changes, there are no changes to it, is the Board of Directors duties list, our investment policies, that again is pretty straightforward, a code of ethics, which again has no changes to it, and then the actual bylaws themselves. Every one of those documents has a separate upload section in Paris, so it'd be beneficial for me to be able to formally put that approved or review date on there, so we would need a motion for that, but I'll be happy to take any questions that's left in Paris. What I'll bring in March will be the sum and substance of it, whether it's our annual investment report, our annual report, although you've sort of seen that, our annual effectiveness report, which that will be a bit more of a challenge to write this year. So there'll be a handful more to approve in March, obviously, along with approving the audit in March, and then we'll be good to go for Paris. So, but I think that's all that I had. I do have a couple items for exec, but happy to answer any questions.
Does anyone have any questions about the recertification of the bylaws, code of ethics, investment policy statement, anything like that before we go forward on that?
Are the duties and responsibilities new, or are these the same as well?
No,
Okay.
yeah.
It just indicates that it's adopted
Oh, okay. I can
today,
use that
so
language,
all of them should say review and approve.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
they're all just
Yeah, that's true.
the same thing.
Yeah.
But otherwise, you
No, they were
can
adopted.
take a motion on that.
And just to refresh my memory completely, I think all of them fit into the category that if needed, if a certain project came up or if something happened banking-wise, like the investment policy statement has a little bit of language in there of narrowing down the banking institutions. We can always redo it mid-year or make a change as needed.
Yeah, you can change your policies as necessary.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions from anyone? All right, so if not, I'll take a motion to accept the recertification with today's date of the four, documents as presented.
I'll make a motion.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks, Darlene. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right. We're good in that section. Okay. Attorney's report, anything at this point in the meeting?
During the executive session.
Okay, we'll move on from that then. Let's tackle the soil testing.
Yeah, you have in your packet, unfortunately, so far only one, but that's okay, there's no pressing need. So, if you're not familiar, I think most of you are though, that probably by virtue of its proximity to the escarpment, you know, the town, and it depends on your perspective, has varying depth to bedrock all over the place. And interesting enough, in the early 2000s, a very extensive study, I'm talking like 41 boreholes were done throughout the park, that showed depth to bedrock as limited as 2 feet to maybe 9 or 11 feet, I'm trying to recall. Believe it or not, nobody, certainly not this office nor Wendell, can find the grid key. So I can tell you what the depth is from soil bore 1 through 41. No idea where any of those were in the park. So it's a general use to us. Without a doubt, and nobody's going to be surprised by this, that 10.4 acre at the corner of Junction and Enterprise is the most sought after, whether it's Project Gammon, and that's just the most recent example, and I can give you an update on that later, that come and ask questions. You know, and those questions can go one of two ways. Hey, we've got super heavy stuff, that's awesome that there's bedrock there, our foundation work will be limited. To what we've seen in a lot of cases of, hey, at a minimum, we'd love to put in a below-grade loading dock. How much is that extra work is that gonna be? Because I've got 10 feet of bedrock to blow up and get out of there, or none, because this is a spot in this spot. I just think that given how marketable that property is, that again, I found myself in Project Gammon. Now, there's sort of the opposite end of the spectrum of sort of sitting there saying, well, I can give you some general knowledge, but, you know, literally, there's a interest, albeit of varying degree, in don't like being handicapped and not able to move forward. Now, when we talk about Project Gammon later, it probably wasn't the sole reason. So, anyway, long story short, I'd love to do a study. This happens to be SJB's bid that's suggesting 11 soil borings for the site. Max cost would be $4,200, and I say that because, you know, there's a likelihood that they could finish sooner. Because it's over the dollar figure that needs to get bid, I did speak to Wendell, asking them for 2 other companies, and did forward requests to those 2 companies, and have not heard back yet. So we probably can't take official action on this, but I just wanted you to understand, you know, maybe it's gonna be $3,500 to $4,000, but that's us. On that particular property in particular, I would never come back and suggest we do something like this for the 1.4 acre parcel, but, you know, without a doubt, this really tends to be, we're kind of flying blind, so, that's the history and the thoughts behind it, and I'll let you know once we get a second bid in to meet our policy, but.
Okay.
Good.
Does anyone have any questions of their own for Tom on that topic? No? Okay. So that leaves us with a motion to go into executive session for consultation with attorney. I'll make the motion. Thanks, Bob.
I'll second Dan.
Thanks, Dan. And someone hit me, please.
Oh, yeah, please.
All right.
Who were the motions, I'm sorry?
That was Todd and Bob.
Okay.
Come on out. Do we have anything else before we wrap things up?
I'll just remind, those of you on the, audit committee that if you could be here at 7:30 on the March 11th date, we'll go, if anybody else, frankly, that's interested, feel free to come. We'll certainly turn around and present the audit findings at the board meeting, 8 o'clock, but if you want to hear straight from the auditors, feel free to join us at 7:30 on the 11th.
And as Tom had said, he wasn't sure if we'd have an in-person or an audio, call from London, but one way or another, they'll be present at the meeting. Yeah. Okay, so that'll obviously also be in emails going out as a further reminder so that the audit committee shows up. And, if nothing else, I'll take a motion to adjourn until the 11th.
So moved from Dan.
Dan and Darlene.
Yep.
All right.
All right, thanks, guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.
I was looking at the thing, I just noticed Christine's in there. When did she start?
Yes, not till the 18th. I got one. I got a